And as the last frames flicker on our season at the movies, between newlyweds and a captured killer, we somehow managed to find our way to a happy ending.
And got through a whole wedding day all without a body.
You must be doing something right.
Well, not so fast, because the murders aren't done yet. As my twin's theory didn't come to be true, and that's okay because we learned the truth about this season's main murder. But speaking of murder, we do have another one to solve by the end, and trust me when I say you'll definitely want to stick around to the end of this video to hear my theory about who killed the latest victim. We've solved the murder of this season, but let's talk about the how and the why, as I'll be breaking down this 4th season of Only Murders in the Building, episode 10, spoilers ahead. As we open with a flashback of them filming the revival of Brazos, as Uncle Brazos has a scene of him jumping off of a roof, which, by the way, a little foreshadowing for Charles mentioning his fear of heights a little bit later in this episode, as Sass taps in for his stunt. See her icing her neck and admiring one of the show's writers, as she hoped to someday tell her own stories with much less stress on her body. Now we see that this dream became a reality as she found her hero of her story, and it was her #1 guy, Charles. We see after the trio finished their recording of their first podcast, Sass was putting the final touches on her first ever script for what became the Only Murders in the Building movie. Flash forward to present day as Oliver and Charles return from learning about Marshall/Rex/ the ex-stuntman turned writer, as they're now concerned about the non-response from Mabel. Now we get a little bit of more foreshadowing here as Charles mentions to Oliver the unfortunate fact that once they solve a murder, another one springs up, as Oliver takes this as a bad omen for his soon-to-be wife being the next victim. Meanwhile, a text comes in and it's from Rex warning them to not come anywhere near her apartment and to not get the police involved, as they look out of the window to see Mabel being held hostage by Rex, who dramatically closes the blinds. Now this week's episode title was My Best Friend's Wedding, which is titled from the 1997 rom-com starring the one and only Julia Roberts. Now, as someone like myself who grew up in the 90s, I've seen my fair share of Julia Roberts movies, and this being one of them. And basically the film follows the story of 2 childhood friends who made a deal to marry one another if they still are single by the age of 28. Now only 4 days before Julia Roberts' main character's birthday, her best friend announces that he's getting married to Cameron Diaz. Now, not to give too much away from the plot, but Julia realizes that she actually is in love with her best friend and she vows to stop this wedding at any cost. Now honestly, like a lot of these episode titles, the title doesn't have much to do with this episode besides the obvious connections to the wedding. Now back with Mabel and Rex, Mabel confronts him about being the protege and being the one that stole the script and killing Sass. And now that the cat's out of the bag, and again, my twin theory wasn't true, but one day, fingers crossed, maybe it'll happen next season, we see Rex brought a gun with him and he's now pointing it at Mabel and prepared to kill her. Now we watch as she plays cool, calm, and collective and pretends to be interested in helping him iron out the rewrites of the script, and he knows that she's stalling, but he agrees to play along. First off, we know this show toes a line with comedy and trying to stay grounded at the same time, but what exactly was Rex's plan? So his plan was to take her hostage, text her murder-solving friends to not come by, and if things go south, he was going to kill Mabel and still get his stolen script made into the movie? Am I missing something? What exactly was Rex's plan? And also, as we find out, his whole thing was to get this movie made to prove his random father that we've never met, let alone heard of, that he was capable of making something of himself and not becoming a hunter. As we'll discuss later, this show's reveal, besides season 1 and I would say last season, but season 2 and now season 3 have the dumbest reasonings for the killer's motives. Now back with Charles and Oliver, they piece together that the killing was a one-person job and that Rex, aka Spider-Man, managed to shoot her and walk across the outside ledge from the opposite side of the building, which is also a whole floor down from Charles's floor, and made it into Charles's apartment all under 12 minutes. Now Charles comes up with the idea to do the same thing that Rex did and to snatch Mabel out of the window without getting noticed. Now Oliver smartly pitches a much better idea, which is suggesting that they use Vince's apartment to make the Tom Cruise mission possible. Now this next scene is very important to tying into one of my theories that I'll be sharing about Lester at the end. As they head over to the west side of the building, they come across Lester, who tells them,
"Your chuppah arrives. Where are we placing it?"
Lester, I have urgent business, so I need you to take over. Now, I trust you completely, but just know if you get anything wrong, I will destroy you. What? All he does is let in murders. Oh, my bride's in the courtyard. Okay.
Charles, I got married in this courtyard, middle of the night with just the stars and the fountain as our witness. I think it's good luck.
Yeah. Lester, I told you when I moved in, I don't really do anecdotes, but have a good day.
Having a wedding, we'll have a good day. Sure.
Now, little did they know this would be the last conversation they had with Lester, and we'll come back to this later, but the comment about Lester always letting the murderers in, but also the good luck fountain, again, more on this later. Now, Loretta arrives and tells her soon-to-be husband about the news of her show moving to New Zealand soon, but clearly he's in a rush to save Mabel, so he says to her that they'll move there together, but sidelines this conversation for later. Now, at Vince's, they fill him and Rudy in on the situation, as the plan is to have Charles sneak into the apartment to get Mabel while Oliver creates a ding-dong distraction. Now, going back to the opening scene, we get the callback of Charles's fear of heights as he freezes on the ledge and needs help and someone to tap in, and normally we know who that is, but this time around it's Oliver, who tells him that he is his ride and not to prepare to die friend, and he supports his best friend and gives him words of encouragement. Oliver manages to relax Charles and get him to pivot as they use Oliver's wedding dance moves to make their way to get Mabel, as Vince and Rudy do the ding-dong surprise to distract Rex. Now, they manage to make it to Mabel, but instead of escaping through the window, Charles wants to confront Rex and get the full story of why he killed his best friend. Now, if y'all remember from a couple episodes ago, I was hoping that Eva Longoria's multi-purpose gun would come back into use. Eva shows Mabel her all-in-one skincare recording gun. Which, by the way, the gun in this episode, it gets a callback later at the end, but I feel like that gun will be used again by the season finale to figuring out who the actual killer is, as Charles uses it against Rex as Oliver gets the gun, and we get the full story from Rex's perspective. Now, in this story, Charles learns of the true identity of the writer of the script as Rex explains his story about his hunter of a father pressuring him into following after his footsteps. Now, admittedly, if the story was written more seriously, this would have been an interesting parallel to have Saz, who was raised by loving parents, and how she followed her own father's footsteps and becoming a stunt artist, and then having that be opposite of what ended up happening to Rex. But again, the show sometimes goes for the comedy over the fleshing out of the characters and its plots. Now, only given 6 months to prove his father wrong, which again, not seeing Rex's dad has to be on purpose, right? And again, Rex is a grown-ass man. What was his father going to do to make him not pursue his dreams? That was never explained. We get the backstory of how Saz was the only person who believed in Rex as a writer, and after the Ron Howard situation, she continued to believe in him and agreed to read his script. Now, while doing this, she wanted to share with him the script that she worked on and that he was the only person that read it. Now, we see that she was a much better writer than Rex, which made him jealous. So instead of being a good friend, we see that he lied to her and said that the script was terrible, but he would take it and do some rewrites. But we see what ended up happening, and we see that he ended up adding some things, removing some things, but in hopes to get a manager by spreading this around Hollywood, and it came across Bev's desk, and the rest is history. We see as Saz learned of the betrayal and called him over to confront him. We watch as he begs and pleads with her to not rat him out, but we see that she wasn't going to let this happen because number one, she hasn't even told Charles yet, and two, what he did was just completely wrong. Now, this is stereotypical writing in movies and shows where a character tells this unnecessary information to the killer as she tells him that she's going to be going to New York soon to tell Charles about the movie, and this obviously was a no-go for Rex, whose career would have been over, and this being the motive for why he killed her. As we see the night of the murder from his perspective. Finally see that the tassel was actually from Saz's fireproof jacket that fell off the jacket as he was preparing to shoot her. As we watch him going back and forth with himself, trying to convince himself that he's not a killer and he's just a writer, but he ultimately tells himself that he has to be a killer in order to be a writer. As we watch him shoot Saz, now again, this Spider-Man character manages to cross the building on the ledge without anyone seeing him outside, and he did this again under 12 minutes. Now, when he arrives, he sees that she isn't completely dead yet, and she tells him that her number one will solve this case after finishing writing Tap In, and we watch Saz die. Back with the trio and Rex, Charles mistakenly has the gun on vibrate as Rex gets the gun back, and he's about to kill our trio, but just as he's about to shoot, he gets shot in the back and dies. As it is revealed that we finally get the return of Jan, who saved their lives by getting her revenge at the same time. The police now in Charles' apartment as they arrest Jan, as we learn that she never left the apartment, but instead she stayed hiding in the walls for 3 weeks, patiently waiting for Charles to find who the killer was and to make her strike and to ultimately get her revenge for Saz. As we watch them say their goodbyes, or in the eyes of Jan, this is a goodbye for now, as I'm hoping that we get to see her again. Before moving on, shout out to Jan. Yes, she is a crazy as hell individual, but she did save the trio, and she's just such a fun character overall, and I really do hope that we get to see her again next season. Which, by the way, who else was disappointed that we didn't get to see Detective Williams in this episode? Now, I would assume that the actress is booked and busy, as she should be, because she's just such an incredible talent. Look, I'm such a big fan of hers, and I'm going to manifest this now. When this show is over, we have to get a spinoff with Detective Williams, trying to figure out the different cases and murder files in New York City, and I don't know, what can we call it? Only Murders in the Building presents Detective Williams Murders New York. And as an added bonus for the writers out there, I hope you listen to this idea because it's pretty killer. We'll have Detective Williams teaming up with Jan, who's going to be her helper in solving these cases, and we'll have like this really cool dynamic between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice. Now, I would be watching that show. Let me know what you all think about my spinoff idea. Again, it will be called Only Murders in the Building presents Detective Williams Murders New York, and again, her co-star would be Jan. Cut to the making of the movie as the trio watches the actors give a spot-on performance of them playing themselves, as we see that the movie is now being made under Saz's script. Now, I was thinking that maybe the movie would have been finished by the end of the season, but clearly it wasn't, which I'm okay with that because I would hope that we would see the premiere of the movie in season 5, and maybe we'll get the return of the actors, Bev, and the brothers' sisters. Now, before we wrap up the final moments of this episode, we see Oliver is still worried about Loretta dying. We have Mabel's side plot of finding herself, which, by the way, was mostly forgotten for most of the season, but she tells Bev that she wants to make a story about Saz's life. Now, meanwhile, we get this really nice moment where Charles sees her one last time in his mind, and he thanks her for writing him a love letter to their friendship. As we cut to the wedding, where Oliver's fears of Loretta not showing up doesn't come to fruition, but instead, she walks down the aisle with her son Dickie and now her son-in-law Will. Now, also from our Only Murders fans out there, we also get the return of Winnie, who we haven't seen since season 2. As we watch them say their I do's, and they're married without anyone dying, well, at least not yet. Now, you'll notice that Lester is still alive and well at the wedding at this point of the episode, as Oliver and Loretta share a dance as they talk about him leaving his best friends behind in Charles and Mabel. Now, later that night, Charles and Mabel meet a new character, as they meet Sophia, who's played by the great actress Taya Saloni, who shout out to Bad Boys 1, where I first saw her in the movie, as she tells them,
I hope it's okay. I was upstairs looking for you. There was no doorman on duty. I took a shot.
So with her now saying that, we now know that Lester died sometime after the wedding. Now, in the conversation, she wants to hire them to search for her husband, Nicky, who is led to believe to be possibly dead. Now, Charles and Mabel don't seem to be interested in helping her out in this investigation of this missing person because it has nothing to do with the murders in the building, as she tells them,
What happened to Nicky has everything to do with this building.
Put a pin in this conversation for a little bit later, but meanwhile, we move over to Oliver and Loretta, who say their goodbyes, as the plan is for him to join her in New Zealand in a couple weeks. As Charles and Mabel put the final touches on the season's podcast, and happy to make it out of the wedding without a dead body, as the trio walk towards the Good Luck Fountain and they find Lester dead. So before getting into my theories about Lester for next season, let's talk about the finale and my thoughts about the season overall. Now, as far as the finale is concerned, I believe this has become a pattern. Now, in my opinion, season 1 had a solid ending in the killer motives and reveal, and I've been on the record of talking about how I felt about season 2 as a whole, but also I wasn't fond of the killers and the motives and the reveal, and the finale just wasn't for me. Which brings us to season 3, which, like season 1 in my opinion, I thought it had good motives and good reasonings, and maybe one of, if not the best lead into a new season with the death of Ben. Now, tying it back to this season's finale, but also sharing my same sentiments how I felt about season 2, I find myself slightly disappointed by the killer's very uninteresting motives and felt that the finale was overall disappointing. Now, positively speaking, the payoff and respect to Saz was handled pretty well throughout the season as well as in this finale. To me, the friendship between her and Charles was felt more so with her being dead than it ever was, in my opinion, when she was alive, and I thought that the idea of her wanting to transition from stunts into telling her own stories to becoming a writer and her having her own script, and Charles being the hero was just a very nice touch in my opinion. Now, another thing I'll say about the finale is I like the continuation of highlighting the trio's growth as friends friends, and they honestly have become family at this point. And them being there for each other, especially in this finale, and being there each other's ride or die. Now, while the idea was very stupid about crossing the ledge, the sentiment worked as Charles was willing to risk his life for Mabel and Oliver was willing to do the same. But again, it goes back to them being family and looking out for one another. And again, this thinking about how they began in season 1 up until where they are as a family at this point in the show. Now, negatively speaking, I thought the overall truth from Rex's perspective was paper thin and just so underwhelming. The whole thing to prove his father wrong, again, a character we've never met, let alone a character that we're just hearing about for the first time. Now, I could change my tune come season 5 and we might meet the father who's seeking revenge of his fallen son, but in honesty, I doubt that they're going to have a comeback or a callback to his father because they've done this before. They'll mention a character and never bring them up again. But if they do that, again, in my opinion, the Rex motives of killing her, to taking credit of her script, and to make it a point not to be a hunter/killer, but he's a writer, again, was just very underwhelming. Don't get me wrong, I love me some Oliver and his relationship with Loretta, and their relationship has a good payoff from last season into this season, but personally, I think their romance this season was all over the place. The whole jealousy angle with Oliver being upset with the co-star went absolutely nowhere. Now look, I'm a huge Meryl Streep fan. I think she's one of the greatest actresses of all time, but her appearances overall just felt like they were just so random and they just had so much limited time with her, and it showed in this season. Now I'm assuming we won't be seeing her all of much next season, or maybe she'll pop up every now and then, very similar to this season, but to me, her leaving to New Zealand is the character being written off for the most part, at least for most of next season, and also setting up the idea that Oliver is going to eventually leave to go to New Zealand once this new missing persons murder case is solved. I wouldn't say that I hated this finale, but definitely would say that I was disappointed in many ways, narratively speaking. Which brings me to my quick thoughts about the season overall. Now, I've expressed through reviews after each breakdown, so I won't repeat a lot of the stuff I've said already, but for me overall, I thought this was a solid season. I'll share a ranking by the end of this video, but I would say this is in 3rd place, and I would say when you think about episodes 1 and 2 and 5 and 6 and even 8, those to me were great episodes, and if I'm being honest, some of those episodes were some of my favorite of the series. I thought when this season leaned into the whole Hollywood aspect of the story, and at times like the show felt like we were watching a movie, that stuff to me really worked and felt very cinematic. Which, speaking of, I do wish it was used a lot more, but the idea of the title of each episode being an actual movie, and sometimes they would use similar themes or some scenes to recreate in the actual episode, was really great to me. But again, love the Saz and Charles friendship being explored more, and of course I love the trio and the banter that they have back and forth and the love they have for another. And if I'm being honest, I thought the Westies Dudenoff story, the side plot, because we know each season has like its own side plot, that to me, the B plot was much better than the ultimate conclusion that we got with the main murder, in my personal opinion. Now, to share my personal rankings of Only Murders in the Building seasons from my least favorite to my favorite, coming to last place, I'm going to go with season 2, followed by season 4, 3, and 1. I thought season 2 had the worst supporting characters, the killer reveal was messy and lacked creative direction, and overall, I was disappointed by the 2nd season. Now, when it comes to season 4, I've already shared my thoughts on the highs and lows of this 4th season. As far as season 3 is concerned, I feel like that was like a return to form. It had a great mixture of comedy, drama, and a very intriguing mystery. But then season 1 is my favorite. Like, it has the best mystery, the discovery of all these interesting characters in the building, the introduction to the trio, and I think the season's mysteries, both what was going on with Tim but also Mabel's past, was very compelling. Now let's get into some unanswered questions and talk about who killed Lester. Now, I'm assuming this had nothing to do with the main plot, but might have something to do with season 5, but you all remember Detective Williams taking the gun that was found in the Paradise? Did that not have any payoff, or was that not important to the story at all? I was convinced that someone was in Saz's apartment in episode 1, but I guess that was nothing important. But the biggest unanswered question that the show and the trio didn't even bring up since episode 7 of this season, who's been watching them this whole time since season 1? Now, I'm more than confident that that reveal will be a part of the Lester situation come season 5. Which, speaking of, let's talk about who could have killed the nice and kind doorman, Lester. But first, what do we know about our victim? First off, we know that Lester was a theater kid. Back in season 2, you all remember that we learned that Lester graduated from Juilliard and began doing off-Broadway work, but stopped getting roles and started drinking, which led to a period of him being homeless before he took his first actual job, which he became the doorman. But the question is, during Lester's time on the street, Who knows what he did to survive and who he met? Maybe he came across some dark people that might have been involved in some mob situations. It's also important to remember that he had a wife and 2 kids, and I would assume that Lorraine, May, and Frank will make an appearance in season 5. Talking about some more information about Lester, let's go back to season 1. If you guys remember, the trio was supposed to release their finale of their podcast, and they were going to reveal that it was Theo and Teddy as Tim's killers, but Lester listened to the podcast as he delivered someone's dry cleaning. I want you all to remember the importance of the dry cleaning. Fast forward to this season during the photo shoot where Lester brought a rack of clothes to Charles's apartment for the trio to wear for the promotion of the Only Murders in the Building movie. Again, dry cleaning, and remembering that our missing persons Nikki was the owner of a dry cleaning company. Now, our mysterious Dame Sophia mentioned that she couldn't find the doorman when she arrived. Now, if what she said is believed to be true, we saw him at the wedding and found him dead the next day, meaning that he died after the wedding and shortly after nightfall. Now, I think it's safe to say that we can put Sophia on our murder board for next season, as she told Charles and Mabel about her husband's disappearance and possible murder having everything to do with this building. As I've mentioned, the connection on Lester and the dry cleaning and Nikki owning a dry cleaning company, there seems to be a connection between the two. Now, going back to Lester telling Charles about how he thinks that the fountain is good luck, and for him to die at that same fountain doesn't seem to be a coincidence to me. Now, if we go back to that conversation that Lester was having with Charles, he said to him that the fountain was their witness, their only witness, meaning that no one was in attendance of their wedding. So here's my wild theory about Lester. What if we have a situation where he married his wife Lorraine, and maybe someone didn't approve of this relationship? Again, we remember that he was homeless. He didn't have a job for a while, so maybe she was a part of some big family or maybe a mob family, and again, they didn't approve of this relationship. And whoever this person is, maybe it was her father or brother or ex-boyfriend. So after years later, after seeking revenge, it could be some possible connection that, again, if there's the mob involved, because the news did say that there was some possible mob connections, and this Nikki guy, or maybe Lester, was killed by a hitman who was responsible for the disappearance of Nikki. Look, it's just a theory. Obviously, we don't know any of the ties until season 5 comes around. But like I said, I feel pretty confident that the fountain is key and the dry cleaning ties will definitely have important consequences in season 5. Which, speaking of, I don't want to leave out the fact that whoever's been following the trio since the beginning wasn't solved, and that may have ties into Lester and Nikki in the building as well. Matter of fact, I actually have the response from the curator who was interviewed by TV Line to answer the missing piece of the puzzle. As you all can see on the screen now, TV Line interviewed the creator of the show to talk about the connections of season 1. As you all can see, the creator said that that was a good question, and that Helga did bring up that something was wrong at the end of episode 8 as far as things being weird in the building. As he continues to say that there are always loose ends to a mystery story, and leaning into those loose ends and holding them now and then and playing a card when you want to play it feels right to me for the ongoing mystery like this. As he continues to say that we will get some resolution and find out who's been following the trio since season 1. Now, another question the interview asked the creator was to talk more a little bit about Lester. As the interviewer called him sweet and innocent, but he says that there is a chance that the death is somehow tied into the dry cleaning king's case. As the creator says that there are a lot of areas that we've been talking about, and looking at the life of someone who was a doorman in the pre-war apartment building in New York City at the moment, and all of that encompasses. Who is the person, and what stuff might they have been doing in their life? So yeah, it sounds like my theory about Lester's past will play into season 5, and again, I think there might be some mob ties. Oh, and by the way, are we all in agreement that season 5 should be the last season of this show? Don't get me wrong, I love the trio, but I think the well of ideas are starting to get dry. So let me know in the comments now, will season 5 of Only Murders in the Building be the last season of this series? Now that's going to be the end of this week's breakdown and final breakdown of this season of Only Murders in the Building. It's been an absolute pleasure covering this season, and what's even better is seeing you all's comments and theories and continuing to support these videos. Now, if you've been watching these videos since season 1, episode 1, I can't thank you enough for the support, so I want to give you all a moment to give you a special shout out. Now, to everyone watching this video, do me a favor, please spam the comments with your thoughts on this finale, the season overall, and share your thoughts and theories about what you hope to see in season 5. Now, of course, if you made it to this point in the video, thank you. Put in the comments right now, #JusticeForLester. Now, of course, I won't be back next week because this was the finale, but between now and next season, I hope you all stick around by subscribing to the channel where I review all types of movies and shows. Now, if you appreciate this video and my coverage of this season, please hit that like button, but also share this video to anyone and everyone you know that loves talking about this show just as much as we do. Don't forget, you all are amazing, stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next video.